We are in historical period 6 this week, second to the last one. That'll be on the AP test. And yeah, so I'll go through this. I think this is kind of a tougher one. It's the Gilded Age is not too much super memorable. But I'll kind of go through it, and you can look at the cheat sheet, see what you know, try the pre-write, give it a shot. Once again, if you want any feedback on that, if you want feedback, some people have asked for feedback on the pre-writes, and comment when they turn it in. I've been replying to those. If you want to write any piece of it, happy to do that. Later this week, I'll post kind of an AP update. You may have seen it, something similar in some of your other AP classes if you're in them. But the College Board kind of has suggestions on workbook to print out ahead of time, have with you for the test, and just make sure everything technically goes smoothly. I'll also include an example that they've given of one of the questions that that could be on there, very similar to what we've been doing on the DBQs. So, but I'll do that probably on Wednesday or so and get that up for you, so something you could take a look at. And I'll be doing my office hour again this week, Thursday 1 to 2 p.m. So feel free to pop in if you'd like to. And then next week, I'll probably do 2 days, since it's the week of the test. I'll look at the AP schedule, make sure I don't schedule it during other AP tests you might have. So I'll do my best on that end. So let's talk about historical period 6, 1865 to 1889. This is the Gilded Age. So we're post-Reconstruction, after the Civil War. A lot of things happening at once. You remember this chapter kind of bounced around time periods, did more topics. So some topics to know from College Board. The economic development of the West. Remember we talked about like the grazing and moving the cattle and building fences and all that kind of thing happening with that. Social and cultural development with westward expansion. We've talked about that too. The towns that are popping up along the way. Things like that. The New South, so sharecropping is big. You still have those Southern Democrats that are kind of controlling things in the South. They've kind of come back and are back in power down there. So that's an issue. Technological innovation. Farming is a big one. We see some technological innovation happen here. The rise of industrial capitalism, right? So with that technological innovation, we also have factories, the Carnegies, the Rockefellers. I think we went pretty heavily over those captains of industry. This is that section. And I would imagine if you get something about the Gilded Age, it'll probably be about that. And the next couple kind of go with that, labor and the Gilded Age, right? So what's happening on the labor side? They're kind of getting screwed over, can't go on strikes, unions are being held down. Think of the Homestead strike here. Immigration, migration, immigrants are coming in and they are getting a lot of those factory jobs because they can be paid less. Responses to immigration, in response we have the nativism popping up. Development of the middle class. Now that you do have some of these factory jobs, middle class is on the rise. You have managers, you have, payment and things like that. Reform in the Gilded Age. So the reform, I think Ida Tarbell in the oil industry, trying to kind of reform some of what's happening, yellow journalism happening here. Controversy of the role of government. So we see the executive power go way down and a little more power to the legislature, Congress, and even the states, and the politics of the Gilded Age. So we'll hit that a little bit later. There's still not a ton, but we'll hit that. So some of the themes: American national identity, increasing our identity as industrial power. With the Civil War, we know that the North made a lot of stuff. Now we're expanding that. Spanish-American War reunites the North and the South. So you can go back through the Spanish-American War to kind of discuss that, right? But this is what we kind of get behind together for the first time, is wielding that big stick, right? When we talk about Cuba and the Philippines toward the end of this era, and we talked about Teddy Roosevelt and what happened with him, Roosevelt corollary. So that's the one thing kind of bringing us back together. So remember the yellow journalism that happens as well. We'll get into that a little bit later. And mechanization, agriculture is going to define a bit of this. Politics and power. So we have a brief period of black men as citizens in the South. That's going to end with Reconstruction. Jim Crow laws, Jim Crow segregation, sharecropping, the New South, right, is here. And the Republicans are going to be in power for most of this. We still have Democrats in power in the South. So Republicans will be in federal power, but we're going to see the federal government, specifically the executive branch, the president, lose some power here. So, some key pieces of outside evidence for this Interstate Commerce Act, right? So allowing, making sure that the federal government has the power to regulate interstate commerce. Sherman Antitrust Act, the McKinley Tariff. There's a lot of things with tariffs and eventually getting to breaking up those trusts. Roosevelt and our boy William Howard Taft as well. Work, exchange technology, U.S. with that industrial power. Steel, the big reason, and the railroads going to expand both north, south, and west. Harsh labor conditions of factories for immigrants. It's one of the reforms, trying to reform conditions. We talked about the jungle and the meatpacking plant, the sausage plant that's about the robber barons and the Gilded Age, robber barons versus captains of industry. I think we covered that pretty thoroughly in class, but so no, kind of the unions, Knights of Labor. And on some of the more extreme sides, Standard Oil, Rockefeller, Carnegie, vertical integration with Carnegie, just some of those things brush up on. Culture and society, social Darwinism, something we talked about, it kind of in and out. We talked about a little bit of the belief of kind of Darwinism, but from a social perspective, that the strongest survive. And so, us as America being stronger, we have to put that will over Cubans, over the Filipinos. That's key. And then within the country, racially, and with immigrants, social Darwinism is a big thing, to feel white superiority over those groups. Anarchism on the rise. So with these bad conditions comes anarchist groups, anarchist talks. A lot of immigrants are anarchists, for sure. Haymarket Square riot. Go with that anarchism. NASA, the National American Women's Suffrage Association, so women really pushing hard for suffrage, along with that temperance, WCTU, Women's Christian Temperance Union. So we want to have gone over that. Settlement houses, the Tuskegee Institute, some of the reforms. Migration and settlement. So many new immigrants from South and Eastern Europe. Manifest Destiny is kind of complete. We've gone to the edge, so we have to expand a little bit. So take a look at those new immigrants, and I think I've already talked about what happened there. Geography and environment. Cities are polluted, bad working conditions, high illness. That's really what America looks like at this point. And then the West is kind of conquered, Buffalo, barbed wire, all of that. So the Homestead Act, some of the West Acts, with the environments out there, and then us in the world. I think I kind of put a lot of the Native American stuff in here. That's kind of the last barrier with like Little Bighorn and starting the reservation system for Native Americans. This is where they all kind of get pushed into Oklahoma, finalized in that Indian territory, and so it'll also be our last kind of era of true isolationism, that we're not really interacting with the world. That's going to kind of break down Spanish-American War, and we really expand in the 20th century. So the Dawes Act for Native Americans, Roosevelt Corollary, I talked about, Teller Amendment. Take a look at that. So like I said, I don't think this is the most memorable historical period. So I think it's one, if you do get this, it probably will be social related in terms of the robber barons, captains of industry, unions, things like that. Or you might be social reform. You might get some of that with temperance and women's rights, Tuskegee Institute, things like that. So that's kind of my guess if it comes from this period, what you could get from this period on the AP test. Thank you, to everyone that's been turning their work. If you notice anything wrong in the gradebook, let me know. I mark it if I don't have it, but if you turn it in via Google Classroom, pretty easy for me to see and find out. You can turn things in late, if there's anything you haven't done, turn it in. Even if it's a little bit hastily done, I'll give you the points. It's a weird time. So just make sure you stay up with stuff. Next week be the AP test. We'll do historical period 7, which I don't think is too difficult because it's the most recent when we talk about World War I, World War II, and some of the lead up to that, Roaring Twenties, Prohibition, that kind of thing. So things that I think are pretty good. And then I'll have those office hours for review twice next week, and we'll have that. So any questions, shoot me an email, shalom@kost.org. Pop in on Thursday to the office hours 1 to 2, and I'll talk to you guys soon.